I was working with someone one-on-one that's taking the course. I'm going to add this into the course as one of the bonuses. But this is a really cool conversation. We're just talking about the modes and like how they sound, how to use them, and how they relate to each other, the relative modes to each other. So if I'm going to take Locrian out for right now, so we're just doing like 1 through 6, right? If I take my major, it's the most major sound. It has that nice hard resolve. Boom, home base, right? And the strongest and the most major sound. Now, if I go to its relative, Aeolian, right, it does sort of the same thing, right? If I want a minor sound, I'm going to go for that Aeolian mode. It's the most minor sound. It's not the darkest, but it's our most pure minor sound. And Ionian major is our most pure major sound. And those are relative, right? It's the relative major and relative minor. We can use this sort of logic and see how these modes play off of each other when we move to, let's say, Lydian and Dorian, okay? Lydian and Dorian would be relative to each other, okay? So if I have Lydian, right, and if I switch this to Lydian, right, that sharp 4, when I get to the 1, it's like, yeah, that's the 1 of Lydian, but it's got this circular feel. What I mean by that is it doesn't really have this like definitive start and end point, right? Right? That doesn't give me this like finalized triumphant feel, right? And that gives us, the way that we were describing it is it's almost as major as Ionian is. Lydian is almost as major as Ionian is, but it gives this feel like something isn't quite right, or the way that we were really talking about it was like, it's almost like a drug-induced brightness or happiness. And it gives a very dreamy feel because it doesn't have a strong grounding to it the way Ionian does, okay? And that's why, like, one of my examples is Dreams by Fleetwood Mac is in Lydian, right? Just because and I'm sure that's why they picked that mode for that particular song. And now its counterpart, its relative, would be Dorian, right? So if I switch this to A minor, right? That A minor feel. Now Dorian has a natural 6 in it, so it's not our natural minor. That flat 6 in natural minor gives us a very dark feel, a very dark sound, because it's what makes the 4-chord minor. In this instance, we have a minor, but now we have a major as the 4-chord because of my 6. And that 6 brightens Dorian up so much, and again, doesn't give us the same definitive structural feel of a natural minor that natural minor gives us, okay? So if you're like using that Dorian, that 6 is going to make this a whole lot brighter. Again, it has this weird dreamy circular feel. So if you mess around with Dorian, like think about that, you know, and really use your ear to sort of like relate to some of this stuff. And then the last two, you know, Phrygian, that flat 2 of Phrygian, right, that is very, very dark. So that's going to be our darkest mode for sure. This is going to be Lydian. You hear that a lot in like neoclassical and metal, you know, certain kinds of metal, definitely. And then what's really funny is when we're talking about brightness, you know, Ionian and Lydian sort of sit there. The only difference is like the structural feel, right? Ionian, the major scale, just gives us like this definitive triumphant ending. And Lydian is just as bright, just as major, just as happy, but it sort of takes the grounding away from us, right? We're not on this like solid grounding like we are with Ionian. What's really interesting is when Phrygian is the darkest of the minor modes, that Mixolydian is the darkest of the major modes, right? And it's the flat 7 in Mixolydian. Now it still is some sort of brightness, right? But if you listen to songs like "Sweet Child of Mine," maybe by Guns N' Roses, and a lot of like stuff like by Van Halen, bands like that, when they want to write something that isn't minor, a lot of times they'll go for this Mixolydian feel, and Mixolydian does lend itself to like being it caters itself to the pentatonic every now and then. So that that is like another step away from just like a pure Mixolydian sound. But Mixolydian, having that flat 7, it's like a major sound, but we're gonna make it just a little bit darker. And that's why if you listen to something like, you know, Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, or I can't even think of like a Van Halen song, but they do it all the time. Something that's major, but they don't want it to be like too, you know, major sounding, you know, especially for that genre. So you can sort of have this major sound, this major feel, and darken it up just a little bit by using Mixolydian, you know, and then you can have a minor feel and make it very, very dark, you know, by doing Phrygian, the third mode. So interesting. Very interesting conversation. I think I'm going to throw some of that with some examples of each one of those modes in the course, because that was a really fun topic. That was a really fun conversation. I hope, I know I have people that follow all different levels, so I hope that wasn't too much for anybody or too little for anybody that sat through the whole 6 minutes of it. So thanks, everybody.